A day in Egypt, waking up as a pyramid worker. When I opened my eyes that morning, the first thing I felt was not silence. It was the distant murmur of human voices and the scent of warm earth. I was lying on a simple mattress made of straw, placed directly on the ground. A dull ache rested in my lower back, as if my body remembered a life of labor before my mind did. As I lay still, I looked toward the sky. A thin beam of the rising sun slipped inside, quietly touching the space around me. I knew then that I was no longer in the world I once belonged to. I could feel it deep within my bones. This was Egypt, and I was a pyramid worker. The early hours of the morning. The moment I stepped outside the hut, a cool breath from the Nile brushed against my face. I was not alone in that feeling. Many others stood beside me, companions of the same fate. Some quietly cleaned their sandals. Others bent down to care for their small children. We did not live in grand or lavish houses, yet our lives were not filled with suffering either. My wife handed me my woolen garment. "There is a harsh wind today," she said. Our breakfast was simple: barley bread, a bit of onion, and a few dates. As I ate, a thought settled gently in my mind. Our lives were modest, but there was order. In return for our labor, we were given food. When illness came, remedies were found. In that quiet moment, I could not have imagined that centuries later, people would believe we were slaves, the shadow of the pharaoh, everywhere. There was only one subject on everyone's mind: the pharaoh. He was not merely a ruler. He was a sacred son, sacred while living, and meant to be immortal even in death. That was why the pyramids were built, so his name would never fade from this world. The structure we were raising now was the greatest on the Giza Plateau, one of the pyramids of Giza. This towering mountain of stone was rising for the immortality of Pharaoh Khufu. It was not simply a structure. It was a gateway, a passage opening into the afterlife of the pharaoh. Arrival at the construction site. As the hours passed, the air began to warm, and the sands slowly turned hot beneath our feet. By the time we reached the construction site, the work had already begun. Stonecutters shaping blocks with steady hands, master craftsmen taking careful measurements, workers reinforcing the ramps. Everyone knew their role. I was assigned to the hauling team. The stones I pulled were blocks of limestone, each weighing several tons. They had been brought from the Nile and shaped here, piece by piece. As we placed the stone onto the sledges, I noticed the sand being watered. This mattered. Wet sand reduced friction, allowing the stone to move more easily. Dozens of hands gripped the ropes. One voice set the rhythm. Now. We pulled as one. My shoulders burned. My hands ached fiercely. But then, we saw it. The stone moved, and in that moment, it felt like one of those rare times when humankind dared to challenge nature itself. How was something this vast built? For us, this was not something to marvel at. It was discipline. As the stones rose, so did the ramps. Made of earth, mud, and rubble, these ramps allowed us to guide the stones upward. Each time a level was completed, the ramp was reshaped once more. The master surveyors were deeply knowledgeable, seasoned by years of experience. They calculated angles by studying shadows, aligned the stones with ropes stretched tight and true. If a block was placed incorrectly, it was set again. Because this structure had to be perfect. Midday break. Among the workers. At the height of the sun, we paused. We moved into what little shade we could find. Silence settled among us, and exhaustion rested heavily on our bodies. The drink we chose was a lightly fermented beer. Drinking water directly was not always safe. As I sat there, I noticed an old scar on the arm of the worker beside me. He had fallen while working the year before. The healers had treated him, and he had recovered. Yes, life was hard, but there was care. We were not left entirely on our own. The death of the pharaoh and the meaning of the pyramid. This was what we were taught. If the pharaoh were not buried with the proper rituals, order itself would collapse. The Nile would not rise. The fields would yield no crops. The gods would turn away. Because of this, every stone was considered sacred. That is why we were not merely workers. We were the silent guardians of order. Only a handful of people, no more than the fingers of one hand, knew the hidden chambers within the pyramid. The corridors, the traps, the sealed rooms. All of it existed to protect the pharaoh's memories, his body, and his precious possessions. For he would need them in the world beyond. As evening fell, as the sun began to set, the shadows of the pyramid stretched long across the darkening ground. I looked toward its edges. The surface of the stones was smooth beneath the fading light. The upper stones were not yet finished, yet even now, the structure already appeared magnificent. In that moment, all my weariness seemed to lift from my body. I felt calm. I felt whole. And a single thought rose quietly within me. My name may never be remembered, but what we are building will live for thousands of years. Thoughts and the depth of night. When I returned to my hut, the children were already asleep. My wife offered me water. She looked at my hands and saw the wounds there. She said nothing. Between us, silence often spoke louder than words. As I lay down, the sounds of jackals drifted in from the darkness outside. Above me, the stars shimmered, and the moon cast its pale, steady light. The very stars the surveyors drew inspiration from. The sacred signs that guided the direction of the pyramid itself. The moment I closed my eyes, a feeling settled within me. I was a simple man, but I was part of something vast, part of a great idea. Final thought. If one day someone sees these stones, I want them to know this. The pyramids were not built by aliens. They were not made by magic. They were built by people who believed, who worked, who created order. And I was one of those people.